Now, Iranian officials are signaling that more protesters may be executed in the coming days as the regime's brutal crackdown intensifies. The warning comes a day after Mohsen Shekari was hanged following his participation in the demonstrations. 11 more people have also been sentenced to death, according to the United Nations. Shekari's death has sent shockwaves through Iran, as Melissa Bell reports, and a caution some viewers may find parts of this report difficult to watch.
The reaction to the news that Mohsen Shekari had been hanged. The howl of a relative as he became the first protester to be executed in Iran in the 3 months of demonstrations. He'd been arrested on September 25th. One of thousands since taken into detention. Just 75 days later, he was executed. The first protester hanged, likely not the last. Tens more faced death sentences.
Why the Iranian authorities choose him as the first victim, I think it has got to do with the fact that we didn't know so much about him, that his name wasn't so known.
It was the death in the custody of the morality police of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini that set off the wave of discontent that has only widened and deepened. Posing the greatest challenge to Iran's regime since the 1979 Islamic Revolution swept the mullahs and their strict Islamic interpretation to power.
And then Mahsa was a young girl, a just normal young girl, but also a Kurdish girl. So in so many aspects, it touched Iranians who have been treated as second-class citizens.
Across Iran this week, a strike called by the protesters, and on Wednesday, known as Student Day in Iran, protests at several universities. Inside Tehran University, Iran's president blamed the United States for what he described as riots. Outside, the protesters' chants echoed in the grounds. Tehran's response to the popular anger has been predictably violent. Already, human rights groups say 458 protesters have died. Many more now face the death penalty.
Death penalty is the strongest instrument of creating fear. It's more than shooting people on the streets.
Death to the dictator, chanted protesters on Thursday night, for now at least, unbowed by Tehran's campaign of fear. Melissa Bell, CNN, Paris.
And joining me now is Azadeh Pourzand, an Iranian human rights researcher whose family was forced to leave Iran when she was just 14. Azadeh, thank you so much for joining us. Hearing the family member of Mohsen Shekari at the top of Melissa Bell's package, you feel the pain, the trauma. It is chilling to think about what the fate is of the other protesters that have been sentenced to death. I want you to tell me how you see the current situation and the brutality around the killing of Shekari.
Yes, so I believe that the brutality, while expected by those of us who are monitoring the situation of human rights in Iran, it's still quite chilling. And unfortunately, as your report also stated, this is just going to be one of many executions to come. And despite the brutality of the regime, whether it's through the shootings, the thousands of detentions, tortures, and so on, the protests continue. And I believe that the regime has now resorted to what they know very well, which is the use of the death penalty and executions as a means to instill fear and intimidation among the protesters. But personally, I don't think that this is going to stop the protesters this time around. I also can, I think, as you said, like there are many more on the death row. There are thousands of detainees that we don't even know enough about. And this is one of the scariest things, because just as Mohsen Shekari's case shows, when a prisoner is not known enough by the international community, by the human rights community, they are at a greater risk of essentially one day their family waking up and hearing that they have been executed, killed, and so on. So there is a lot to unveil beneath the surface of the numbers that we hear in terms of the detentions, the the trials that are absolutely in violations of due process procedures, and with that comes lots of fear of more and more executions to come.
And it is an absolute scary thought. And as you say, the protesters are galvanized. You say that they don't want to stop right now. I want to talk about the protesters that have been arrested, some that have been released, talk about harrowing experiences. As you say, this is the tip of the iceberg. We don't really know the true scale and the numbers in a system that doesn't have a free judiciary. Is there support or any resources for people on the ground, or do you believe the international community at some stage should be stepping in? And the question is then how? How does the international community help?
Yes, I believe it's a complicated question. I can tell you that the average person on the ground protesting is not happy with the condemnations and the statements that the international community has been making, and does not think that this is adequate or effective. As much as it actually takes lots of advocacy on our side as human rights defenders abroad to even get these kinds of statements, or like, let's say, a UN special session and so on. But I think that the people on the ground want to see action by the international community. They want a concerted, unanimous effort by the world to consider the Islamic Republic an illegitimate government, an illegitimate regime. In the absence of the possibility of doing any kind of a free form of a referendum, these protests should be considered as a kind of a referendum against the Islamic Republic's legitimacy, and these need to be hand in hand with, with a variety of means. For example, using universal jurisdiction to hold accountable, various levels of authorities of the country that take part in persecutions, whether it's the judiciary, the security forces, and so on, is stopping the money from flowing outside. It is, rethinking and reconsidering the continuation of the JCPOA negotiations at this point in time when people and children are being killed on the street. It is the embassies of various countries trying to find ways to send high-level observers, into these courts where people are being trialed for 2 minutes and then killed afterwards. So I think the important piece about the international community, it sits with the need for coherence, with action-oriented, and with a more concerted effort beyond merely Western countries. It needs to be truly an international response to this level of brutality. And we need to operate with a sense of urgency as well. Azadeh Pourzand, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights with us.